let's get started. Hi,
Sure.
David. It's great to have you here in this webinar where we will be talking about the EU AI Act. And maybe to get started, um, you have been working in the financial sector for already like 20 years, I believe. When did you actually start with machine learning models?
This was actually 6 years ago. I started my career when Basel II was introduced in 2006 with developing rating models and the validation, and then became over the years pretty experienced with the regulatory communication, so how to sell models to the regulator, how to validate them efficiently. And then 6 years ago in RBI, we made the decision that actually with the new cloud technologies available, with machine learning available, with the data available, we should also reuse our risk modeling know-how also for models outside of risk. And this is how it started. And since then, I'm leading a team of 50 people, roughly, that which purpose is to deliver use cases with a top or bottom line impact. And I rather enjoyed the last years, not being forced to speak to the regulators, but I guess with the EU Act, with the AI Act, this might change.
Okay. Yes, indeed. And speaking of which, I think compared to other sectors in finance, at least, there has already been quite some regulation. So for teams like your team at RBI who have already been working in this type of regulatory environments, how do you think actually this will change?
Indeed, when I said I didn't have to talk to the regulator, I didn't mean we didn't have to respect the regulations. And there are many other regulations already in place that we have to respect. Most importantly, the GDPR, which is also industry independent as the AI Act. So this is relevant to everyone. And then we have some specifics like the bank secrecy law, for example, which is also very strict on the treatment of data. So we are actually we are used to treating our data carefully. We are used to picking our use cases carefully in line with what is allowed. And we are also used to implement them as we are working in the cloud in a very high security environment. And I think from this perspective, the AI Act for the banking industry will not bring us so much new topics, but time will tell if I'm right.
Yes, exactly. And maybe a small tangent. So you have a fairly big data science team. We all know that hiring people in data science and AI is fairly challenging because obviously everyone is looking for these people. The fact that you are working already in a regulated environment doesn't seem to be very appealing to me as a starting point if you reach out to people. So how do you actually find talent and how do you maybe convince them that working in such a high security, high regulated setting actually is worth the effort?
Mhm. Uh, it's a good question, and it became more and more difficult to find relevant people, even aggravated by the fact that we are very picky uh, in choosing our future colleagues. So, for example, we are asking everyone who is making it to the second round to work on a use case over the weekend, that we really see how they are working and how they are approaching a problem and how they are thinking. And this turned out to be a very well or very good indicator of um, well-equipped and well-trained people. And since we are doing this in this very diligent way, we have also much lower fluctuation. But coming back to the question, I think in the working in the cloud, we have experience for the last 6 years. Working in the cloud is one of the factors because not many companies are that strictly working in the cloud. So I talked to a German car manufacturer who will never join the cloud because of many security reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And also in the banking industry, this is not quite common. So if you want to learn how to use the cloud efficiently and safely, this is one topic. And the other topic is banking, and as I said, the regulations like GDPR apply to everyone. Yeah, so it's regardless where you go. You handling with data, you always need to treat your data diligently. If you develop a model, then 80%, at least 80%, is data processing, data preparation, data governance, data cleaning. Now the AI Act is making it more concrete what is to be expected in the sense of AI solutions. But if you are an experienced modeler, then you will be used to this fact, and therefore for me there's not a big difference if you're now working in a highly regulated environment like banking, or in a highly regulated environment like pharmaceutical industry, or in the lesser regulated environment like retailers, because in the end, the issues, the topics, data governance problems, data handling, deployment, operations are everywhere the same, I guess. So this is how I try to convince the people, and in the end, data scientists love to continuously learn. This is really a characteristic I very much appreciate. And if you have strong senior people in your team, where the younger colleagues can still see the benefit of learning, then you also have a big argument to join.
Okay, that's that's actually very good point. That somehow like GDPR regulation applies to everyone anyway. So it's actually maybe a misconception sometimes that these teams are more heavily regulated than others. And actually with the AI Act, I guess that's even going to be more the case, because clearly the AI Act will apply to all high-risk use cases and not just the ones in finance. So speaking of which, like we promised to talk a bit about the EU AI Act itself. So what do you think are like the key aspects of that act? And maybe as a second point, in banking at least we have done model risk management for quite some time. Which parts of the AI Act can we map on existing aspects of, say, traditional model risk management, and which aspects would be new according to you?
Mm-hmm. I mean, touching the first point, so the AI Act basically comes with a risk assessment, risk classification of the model. So there's a clear statement, and this I like very much. In Europe, there are certain applications of artificial intelligence that are prohibited, that are forbidden. This is in line with our values. This is where the European Union makes a statement. This is what we don't want. So, for example, social scoring or subliminal influencing people, violating their fundamental rights. And then all the other applications per definition are allowed. And then they are running a risk-based approach. And here we are already very close to the model risk management, because this is also the tiering in model risk management. So the more risk, the more diligently you need to develop. This is a principle that is also implemented in the AI Act. And then we have these high risk applications. And if you ask me, as this applies to all the industries, from the banking perspective, even for these high risk models, the AI Act is not imposing fundamentally new requirements. For someone outside of the financial industry, you have to know that rating models, risk models are regulated since 15 years, 20 years with Basel II, Basel III, and the following regulations, and are diligently checked and audited by the ECB, the European Central Bank, by the local authorities, by internal audit, by the validation unit. So being checked as a modeler is quite normal. At the same time, if you're an experienced modeler, you anyway would like to follow a certain process in order to make sure that your model is correct. So I'm not seeing anything that worries me in the AI Act that a diligent modeler would not do from an intrinsic motivation to deliver a good model, because in the end, you want your model to be fit for purpose. You want your model not causing any harm. You want your model to work continuously. You want to have checks to learn when the model stops working in the intended way, etc. So from this perspective, I'm not seeing much new. However, there are some details that I think we still need to develop. So first of all, it is the picking the right use cases. Yeah, so there is now this fundamental right violation that should be avoided, and therefore, in the beginning of a use case, you need to ask yourself, okay, is this from an ethical, moral standpoint something that you should do? Yeah, so is this somehow violating fundamental rights? This is more tricky than you think, specifically in banking, as it is about credit risk decisions, etc. Or if you use AI in the area of HR, it's also considered to be of high risk because it might have a negative influence on people. Another topic that was always there is the topic of bias. So as a modeler, you're always interested that your model generalizes. This means that you trained on a representative sample. This means that the data on which you trained the model is looking similar to the data you are applying it to. But now the AI Act is turning the knob one notch further, because now we need to detect in case that we have a bias in our training data. We also need to mitigate somehow this bias. So in some sense, it becomes a tricky question how to decide how we can change the future compared to the past using this model. So this is maybe something that comes on top. And also the notion of fairness is something that is new. Specifically, if you are creating a classification model, then you want to discriminate by definition. But if you think about it, fairness then boils down to have separate calibrations for different subgroups in your portfolio, so that within each relevant subgroup, everyone has then, compared to another subgroup, the equal chance to be selected. So there are some new elements, but I think from the overall structure, nothing new. It is even starting with the AI is even starting in this high risk area. We're saying that each user or each deployer of an AI model needs to have a risk management system in place that covers the full life cycle. So from the development over the validation to the deployment, to the regular monitoring, and then eventually to the retiring. So it is not resembling model risk management, it is even explicitly mentioning it.
Yes.
And from this perspective, and the AI Act, by the way, specifically in the banking industry, is not the only regulation that is fostering this. The new capital requirements regulation, so the Bible of the financial industry, is also in the new version that is coming out soon in the CRR3, is also emphasizing model risk management a lot. And we see similar regulations in the US, and recently it was also implemented in the UK. So we see a global trend towards this direction, but again, I'm not afraid. I'm just seeing this as a formalization of the process a diligent modeler anyway would have done or should have done.
Okay, that's clear. And indeed, when talking about AI, many people are concerned about fairness, especially. No, fairness is actually, is of course the challenge of defining fairness is not so much mathematical, I guess, but it's rather to understand exactly what's the purpose of the model and in what context is it going to be applied, and then determining what fair actually means does not always have a unique answer, right? I give an example. I'm Belgian. In Belgium, we have a very complicated political system, especially given the fact that we have a Dutch-speaking and a French-speaking population. So suppose, for whatever reason, that you'd like to build a credit risk model, a credit decision model that needs to be fair in Belgium. So then it should ideally not depend on what is my mother tongue, if it is French or Dutch. No, I can do many different things. I can first of all say, I will just remove the language feature altogether and model like this. Obviously, then I might be able to reverse engineer the language. If I know, for instance, the location and the country, I will be able to infer this. So this is probably not a good approach to build a fair model. I can require that the result is exactly the same if but if I do that, then suppose, for instance, that on average, Dutch-speaking people like myself typically take higher amounts of risk, and say French-speaking people would be a bit more careful. Then it means that the French speakers will somehow pay for my risk-taking attitude if we want the decision to be exactly the same. So there is these type of discussions that have to happen. Like, how do you come to a sound decision on those topics?
Very difficult. I don't have an answer here. This is still a process of discussions, and you laid it out perfectly. So the classic bias that we think about is between men and women, and even if you omit the gender in your model, this the gender influences other variables. So even if you are now starting to exclude all the biased variables from your modeling, you very quickly will find out that not much is left, not many features are left, and then you are actually not really able to come up with a model. At the same time, a model wants to differentiate between different groups, specifically in the credit risk, but also in other circumstances. So in the customer relationship management, shall I send an offer? Shall I not send an offer? Or shall I give the medicine? Shall I not give the medicine? So there are different, and every industry needs to find their own definition of fairness, because, as you rightly said, this is not a mathematical question, that's an ethical, societal question. And once this is clear what we want, and here I also expect this will change over time, as we also see, if we're looking back, our perception of fairness has also much changed. Is, for example, I don't know, in Switzerland, women were for a very long time not allowed to vote, for example, which from today's perspective is completely ridiculous, etc. Once the industry has defined what fairness really means, then we can formulate this in a mathematical format. And we looked at this. So there's a fairly big research already available and many methods available. I mentioned one implicitly before, is the equal odds method. So where you say, okay, once you define which subgroups you would like to treat separately because they need special attention, then you can calibrate your models compared to the risk in my case, in this group, and then within this group you have a fair comparison between the members of the group, which is not influenced by a different situation for the other group. Yeah? So you can compensate somehow for this gender pay gap by calibrating for men and women separately, for example. Mm-hmm. Is this the classical implementation of what a non-modeler would see as fair? I don't know. but at least from the credit model perspective, it's already much fairer. But we also have to see that making a model fair, specifically in this classification setting, makes it also less accurate and less performant. So it's a trade-off between performance, so usability at the end, and fairness. You cannot have both, and that's the interesting discussion that we will have to lead in the future.
Yes, it's a balancing act indeed. And maybe one last point here. If you think about fairness and groups, we often think about like one-dimensional variables like gender or, say, in my example, the mother tongue. However, in many cases, a minority might be defined by multiple attributes together. So
Yeah.
then identifying all of those minority groups in itself becomes a fairly complex question as well, I guess, right? So do you expect that this will also be taken into account when say the definition of a minority group will also be worked out in more detail as we learn more as a society about building fair models?
I think so.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, think of gender is not binary anymore.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So even taking it from this perspective, and even worse, or let's formulate it positively. The AI Act as well as the GDPR should and shall raise the awareness among the people in the European Union about data protection and in the future also about artificial intelligence. And I think this per se is a very positive signal, and we also see this in our company that the last 5 years we were pretty alone with our modeling exercises, and no one really understood what we are doing, and was also not interested if we are not really doing a data use case together. But now everyone is interested, and everyone wants to learn, and everyone is eager to use it. And this is positive because we have to deal with these questions as a society because it's not a mathematical question. But at the same time, research needs to find solutions in order then to implement the societal agreements. So this is positive. At the same time, it is a very tricky thing because now we discuss credit risk models implicitly, but if we are now go further to the general purpose AI applications like ChatGPT to name one, you can see how more and more politically correct this chatbot became. But this is not happening by nature or by the training data. This is happening because someone on the developer side made a conscious decision that a certain behavior is not accepted. So this shows how these discussions in the society need then also to be reflected in our AI solutions. And maybe this is happening via continuous feedback, or this is happening via a different mechanism. But in any case, it's important that we are discussing that because, of course, AI can't be used in a negative way. And this is what the AI explicitly wants to avoid, this fundamental rights violation.
Yes, exactly. Now, we've been talking for a little while now on the AI Act itself and on regulation. Generally speaking, as you already said, when you read these type of guidelines, most of it you would expect that people already do anyway, or that they should do this. Still, if we talk about regulation, very often it's looked at as, say, something that slows down innovation, that adds to the burden of bringing new ideas into production. How do you convince people actually that this is we're actually pushing good practice, and it should ideally speed up innovation, especially in high risk areas where otherwise it's very dangerous to just deploy anything without too much vetting. So how do you defend that approach within the organization? Do you need to raise awareness, or are you giving examples, or like what works according to you?
So the AI Act is only imposing the strict rules on the high-risk applications.
Yes.
And everything that is not prohibited and is not a high-risk application is allowed and is not regulated. And here actually are the most relevant use cases for our purpose. So what we are doing most of our time is automating processes. And this is a low-risk application. So unless it's in HR, but before I tackle something in HR, I have millions of other use cases that are more beneficial and easier to implement. And here, the AI Act is just asking for a code of conduct, which is basically recommending that you follow the same rules. So the rules of a diligent modeling process. And so therefore, the AI Act for most of the applications will not become very effective. Secondly, innovation is ingrained into the AI Act via these regulatory sandboxes where you can try out some things, and research is completely carved out of this AI Act. So anything for purpose of research can be done anyway. Yeah, it's just a commercial use that is regulated. So from this perspective, I'm not seeing any negative impact on innovation, and any practitioner will, any experienced practitioner will anyway say, if you're not following the diligent modeling process, you are anyway slower in the end. It just feels not like this because you make errors, you have problems, you need to fix them later, but it's an illusion to think that making it properly, developing a model properly slows you down. At the same time, I'm a little worried that this AI Act in fact slows us down because new stakeholders are coming into the picture. So we have to deal with new authorities. In Austria, for example, the AI authority is in the telecommunication area. It's not the banking authority, which has experience with models, but it's the telecommunication area that might be less experienced in this area. So new players are on the block. Lawyers, legally trained people are suddenly interested in this area with limited technical and modeling knowledge. And they are bringing up problems, or they might address issues that for a modeler are actually not existing. And we saw this in the beginning of Basel II, when the modeling era in the banking started in a regulated way. It took a while until banks and regulators understood each other, and the regulators learned how to effectively regulate and oversee this modeling. And I expect the same process for the AI Act, and this effectively will mean in the beginning, yes, you will need to have more effort in explaining your AI solutions, because suddenly people are interested that have only limited technical understanding.
Okay. Yeah. On the other hand, as we said in the beginning when discussing about fairness, it's good to have multiple points of view. So becoming better at explaining actually what the AI application is supposed to do might also enhance the credibility of the application, I guess.
Yes, and also globally, because everyone is saying, yeah, the EU has the first AI law in place and makes a statement. In the US, the US is actually much more advanced in model risk management than the European Union. And in fact, even in the AI area, there's an executive order that is trying to already govern the AI developments. While in the EU, we needed 7 years of discussions to bring this AI Act into existence. So there are good developments on a global scale. I mean, not everywhere, but looking at the US, that I think everyone is going in the same direction ultimately.
Okay, well, thanks for these comments, David. And I'm afraid we're already at the end of this webinar. So thanks a lot for all the valuable inputs. It was interesting to hear your point of view about what is important in AI Act, how to map it to model risk, and especially also how to introduce fairness and concepts related to this into the mix. So thanks again. And
Thanks for having me.
thanks
It's a pleasure.
everyone for joining. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.